Good evening. I'm going to read you an article that appeared in the Daily Mail newspaper Saturday the 31st of October 2020. It is written by Dr. Mike Yeadon, and I'll just read it. The headlines were, you can get that paper yourself, you can go online and look for it. 3 facts number 10's experts have got so wrong. The majority of the population is susceptible. Wrong. Only 7% infected so far. Wrong. Virus death rate is 1%. Wrong. Dr. Mike Yeadon, PhD in respiratory pharmacology and the former chief scientist at PFIZER. He said this, he wrote this. Earlier this week, my wife and I were congratulating ourselves on being in France, far from the draconian COVID restrictions now spreading throughout Britain. Then on Thursday, with less than 24 hours' notice, President Emmanuel Macron announced his plan to plunge the French into a second lockdown for at least a month. Now, following tense discussion in Cabinet, this country is heading in the same direction. But while Boris Johnson will be the person announcing that catastrophic decision, are being dictated by a small group of scientists who, in my view, have repeatedly got things terribly wrong. The Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies, SAGE, S-A-G-E, has made 3 incorrect assumptions which have had and continue to have disastrous consequences for people's lives and the economy. Firstly, SAGE assumes that the vast majority of the population is vulnerable to infection. Second, that only 7% of the population has been infected so far. And third, that the virus causing COVID-19 has a mortality rate of about 1%. In the absence of further action, SAGE concludes that a very high number of deaths will occur. If these assumptions were based on fact, then I might have some sympathy with their position. After all, if 93% of the country, as they claim, was still potentially vulnerable to a virus that kills 1 in 100 people who are infected, I too would want to use any means necessary to suppress infection until a vaccine comes along, no matter the cost. The reality, though, is rather different. Firstly, while COVID-19 virus is a new, other coronaviruses are not. We have experience of SARS in 2003 and MERS in 2012. While in the UK, there are at least 4 known strains of coronavirus which cause the common cold. Many individuals who have been infected by other coronaviruses have immunity to closely related ones such as COVID-19 virus. Multiple research groups in Europe and the US have shown that around 30% of the population was likely already immune to COVID-19 before the virus arrived, something which SAGE continues to ignore. SAGE has similarly failed to accurately revise down its estimated mortality rate for the virus. Early in the epidemic, SAGE modelled a mortality rate of 1%. And from what I understand, they may now be working with a number closer to 0.7%, which is still far too high. After extensive worldwide surveys, preeminent scientists such as John I. Oandis, professor of epidemiology at Stanford University in California, have concluded that the mortality rate is closer to 0.2%. That figure means 1 in 500 people infected die. When applied to the total number of COVID deaths in the UK, around 45,000, this would imply that approximately 22.5 million people have been infected. That is 33.5% of our population, not SAGE's 7% calculation. SAGE reached its conclusion by assessing the prevalence of COVID-19 antibodies in national blood surveys. Yet, we know that not every infected individual produces antibodies. Indeed, the immune systems of most healthy people bypass the complex and energy-intensive process of making antibodies because the virus can be overcome by other means. The human immune system has several lines of defense. These include innate immunity, which is comprised of the body's physical barriers to infection, and protective secretions, the skin and its oils, the cough, reflex tears, etc. Its inflammatory response to localize and minimize infection and injury, and the production of non-specific cells, phagocytes, that target an invading virus, bacterium. In addition to the immune system produces antibodies that protect against a specific virus or bacterium and confer immunity, and T cells, a type of white blood cell that are also specific. In the T cells that are crucial to our body's response to respiratory viruses such as COVID-19, studies show that while not all individuals infected by the COVID-19 virus have antibodies, they do have T cells that can respond to the virus and therefore have immunity. I am persuaded of this because of the 750 million people the World Health Organization says have been infected by the virus to date. Almost none have been reinfected. Yes, there have been a handful of cases, but they are anomalies, a tiny number among 750 million people. The fact is, the people don't get reinfected. That is how the immune system works. And if it didn't, humanity would not have survived. So, if some 33.5% of our population have already been infected by the virus this year and are now immune, and a further 30% were already immune before we even heard of COVID-19, then once you also factor in that a tenth of the UK population is aged 10 or under, and therefore largely invulnerable, children are rarely made ill by the virus. That leaves about 26.5% of people who are actually susceptible to being infected. That is a far cry from SAGE's current prediction of 93%. It is also worth contextualising the UK death toll. Ministers and some parts of the media present the pandemic as the biggest public health emergency in decades, when in fact mortality in 2020 so far ranks 8th out of the last 27 years. The death rate at present is also normal for the time of year. The number of respiratory deaths is actually low for late October. In other words, not only is the virus less dangerous than we are being led to believe, with almost 3/4 of the population at no risk of infection, we are actually very close to achieving herd immunity, which is why I am so convinced this so-called second wave of rising infections and sadly deaths will fizzle out without overwhelming the NHS. On that basis, the nation should immediately be allowed to resume normal life. At the very least, we should be avoiding a second national lockdown at all costs. I believe that SAGE has been appallingly negligent, and its incompetence has cost the lives of thousands of people from avoidable non-coronavirus causes until simultaneously decimating our economy. And today I implore ministers to start listening to a broader scientific view. My argument against the need for lockdown is not too dissimilar to the Greta Barrington Declaration, co-authored by 3 professors from Oxford, Harvard and Stanford universities, laughably dismissed as emphatically false by Health Secretary Matt Hancock, who has no scientific qualifications, and signed by more than 44,000 scientists, public health experts and clinicians so far, including Nobel Prize winner Dr. Michael Levitt. In my opinion, this government is ignoring a formidable collective receptive scientific opinion and relying instead on its body of deified yet incompetent advisors. I have no confidence in SAGE, and neither should you, and I fear that yet again they are about to force further decisions that we will look back on with deep regret. If we are to take one thing from 2020, it is that we should demand more honesty and competence from those appointed to look after us. Total words in the Mail on Saturday, 31st of October 2020 by Dr. Mike Yeadon. Thank you for listening, and make your own research and make your own mind up as if it gets to stay up or even go up. We'll just keep trying. God bless you all.